Hi everyone, my name is Paul Reichstein and I'm the resident teaching artist at Bell Shakespeare. We're joined today by Peter Evans, who is co-artistic director of Bell Shakespeare, and we're here to have a bit of a chat about A Midsummer Night's Dream, which you've just begun directing. Thank you for joining us, Pete.
Thank you, Paul.
A few questions for you. A Midsummer Night's Dream is one of Shakespeare's greatest crowd pleasers. Why do you think we're still performing this story?
I think that at its heart, it is such a generous play. It has had a big, warm, beating heart. It's also, I think, there's a truthfulness, particularly in the lovers, that really goes to the heart of what it is to be young and in love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that truthfulness is so affecting that we recognise ourselves. And I don't think just young people, I think everybody can recognise themselves in the kind of irrational madness of what it is to be in love. And Shakespeare kind of digs away into there and has a lot of fun in it. And it's not to say that there isn't pain involved in that. We all know what that's like.
Yeah.
But there's a kind of great joy in showing the foibles and the silliness of what it is to be in love.
Yeah.
I think also there's a kind of structural element to it, is that the play is so beautifully woven together that they take these kind of four stories, but really three main stories between the mechanicals putting on the play within the play, rehearsing in the forest, and the lovers are kind of banging around the forest, fighting and getting back together.
Yeah.
And then there's the fairies and the big fight between Titania and Oberon and her meeting Bottom and all that. But he weaves it so beautifully, and the structure of it's so pleasing.
Yes.
That you're in one story and then it bounces into another one and then you return to that one. And I think that we love those kind of storytelling as well.
Absolutely.
And I suppose we also can't deny that it's magical, and that we love the fable aspects of it. That there's a fairy tale element to it as well. And that combined with what is in fact a very real lover's tiff,
Mm-hmm.
I think is really pleasing.
Yeah.
I mean, what's it like? Like, you must have performed it a lot.
A lot, absolutely. And I think that's definitely the joy for me, is that there's sort of unbridled childishness to a lot of it. And then in stark contrast, the sort of very structured world of Athens.
Yeah.
And I know Harold Bloom talks about this being Shakespeare's masterwork. And I feel that that's what the masterwork is. That's sort of the masterpiece of it, is that it's those worlds that shouldn't relate, and yet he throws them in together. Do you tend to agree?
I think that's right. I think that's great. And we don't see work like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not a usual thing.
Yes.
And so the kind of mixture of the fairy tale and then the kind of realism and the way he kind of puts those things together in such a beautiful way. I think Bloom's right about that. I mean, it's not the only masterwork, but it's certainly the kind of first one that seems to, where he's just got it completely right. And it's intriguing because it's one of the few plays where we assume that he's made up the plot.
Yeah.
Almost all the other plays, their plots are borrowed from different sources, whereas this one he seems to have taken great delight in just kind of putting it all together.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because I think for a lot of people who have performed it or done it at school or done it in the park or seen it in the park. Like, it's one of those plays that I think possibly is one of you feel like you've seen it the most out of Shakespeare's work. And I think that also makes you attached to it, and you kind of really connected to it and want to see what somebody else is going to do with it.
Everyone's got a personal history with it in some way.
I think so.
Certainly the case with me too. I think back to year 11, it was the first one that was chucked at me.
Yeah.
Which was great. Do you think that this is you're directing this specifically for a student audience?
Yeah.
Do you think all the qualities we just described about it, that's why it would have a strong appeal to schools' audiences in that sense, that playfulness?
Yeah, I think so. I think that sometimes for students it's not only their first Shakespeare, but it might be one of their first experiences of the theatre.
Mm-hmm.
For some of the younger students. And I think that a play full of magic like this, that also has young characters in it,
yes,
is obviously appealing. But also, I mean, this is because we do it with 8 people.
Yes.
So every actor has to play 3 different characters, and one of the things I like, I think this is good for purely adult audiences as well, but certainly for a student audience, is that a lot of the play is about transformation, and that we get to see actors transform into different characters, and I think that's a really enjoyable thing about the theatre, is that you know that this person's just pretending to be this person, and they're going to put on a hat and be that person, and we're really trying to kind of exploit that you're in cahoots with the audience and going, okay, come with me. This is pretty mad, but let's just go.
It feels like that's part of the old nature of what theatre originally was, wasn't it? That it was a sort of a trip of the imagination. So often, obviously, we put on stage something that is supposedly real, but perhaps this is an opportunity to sort of throw that off a bit and show the inner workings of sort of.
I think so. I think that's why we still go to the theatres, because we know that it's, you know, pretend, and we know, but we make a choice to kind of get involved in that and to go with it. And certainly I'm particularly interested in that and seeing the edges of that. Seeing the edges of whatever the theatre, literally seeing the edges of the theatre, so that we know always that we're recommitting to the experience. Which I think is, and this play, of course, because we have this group of amateur actors putting on a play, there's a double thing going on there. It's that we're watching people be people putting on a play, which I think is beautiful. And although they're kind of clowns in a lot of way, and Shakespeare has a lot of fun with them, anybody who has put on a play, whether you've done it at your school or you're a professional, you can see the truth in those people when they're putting on the play, and the little one-upmanship that happens, and the director trying to keep control of the room, and the lead actor is kind of knows more than anybody else. And it's got all the kind of things that we've all experienced when a group of people try to get together and create something.
And it feels like a gift that Shakespeare knew that as well. I feel like he's making a comment on the theatre world in which he lived, in which obviously you have ham actors and then great actors.
And he does that a lot, though, doesn't he? A lot of the plays have references to acting.
Absolutely,
and to representing people, and it keeps coming back and back and back. And I imagine going to the theatre at the time where you got to know the actors and the audience got to know that the in-jokes must have been huge.
Yes, that's right.
Must have been lots of fun going on between them all as the early stages of kind of commercial theatre.
Yeah, for sure. Pete, I'm just wondering about it feels like a very physical piece, and you're working again with Nigel Poulton, and you've worked with Nigel before on utilising an incredibly disciplined and expressive physical method, Meyerhold's biomechanics. What are you hoping that methodology might lend to this particular production?
Well, the stuff that Nigel does, so we kind of work, as you well know, because you went through it with Macbeth, but it involves a kind of 90-minute to 2-hour, very vigorous physical work that over time starts to involve this kind of system of breaking the body into constituent parts and breaking movement into different parts. And the immediate effect it has is it creates an ensemble. That there's a feeling of working together and working hard together, and then sharing physical duties and physical weight that creates a beautiful ensemble sense. But then, of course, it also creates a language by which we can talk to each other about movement, about speed, about weight, about all the things that make up the physical life of the stage. Now, the dream in particular, because we're doubling with lots of different characters, then that becomes really interesting, because sometimes you can completely transform from one character to another just by changing weight, or just by changing your posture slightly, or the way that you walk slightly, and so this language is a beautiful way to explore that, and just kind of explore the limits of what your physicality might be. So obviously that's going to have quite a large bearing on the way that we double and the way that we play between characters. There's also the set that we've built has the opportunities of climbing through and around. And so the physical discipline is obviously very important, just in terms of, safety and kind of strength and all those sort of things, because the theatre can sometimes be a dangerous place. Then we're going to injure ourselves very easily. But at the same time, if we're physically very disciplined and know exactly what our bodies are doing, then we can exploit that set more and more and more. So I find that vital. Then there's a kind of choreographic element, is that it's really nice in a play like this to sometimes be able to abstract the movement or abstract it, so we're not just trying to create a little piece of naturalism, that we can create some abstract shapes and interact together in a much more magical way, I suppose, to meet this play. And I think Nigel's work and what we'll do with that will contribute a lot to that.
Yeah, and having done it before, I feel that because it's one of those plays that you have to get past the realms of naturalism, and in what is 90 minutes, jumping between those three distinct worlds, perhaps Meyerhold is really going to give you the tool and the palette to find really interesting ways to get from A to B to C, and knit all of that together.
I think that'd be right. I hope that'd be right. It's intriguing because the last two times, I worked 3 times with Nigel, and the last 2 times have been on quite serious tragedies, with Julius Caesar and with Macbeth. So it's also interesting with such a kind of focused and rigorous discipline is that now going to apply it to a comedy. Yeah. And I think that's going to be interesting too, to see what happens.
Definitely, because I mean, in comparison to Macbeth, which is just this shotgun kind of plot that goes straight through, this one bounces all over the place.
Crazy.
It's part of its joy.
Yeah.
This particular production of Midsummer Night's Dream, it has to be a 90-minute version.
Yeah.
The main reason for this, I guess, is because it's for school programs.
So,
get the kids in on a bus, get them to leave on a bus in a certain period of time. What the challenge of editing, what I guess could be over 3 hours as a production, Midsummer Night's Dream, perhaps.
Really boring one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. We should have actually timed it before we're doing the editing. That's right, but the challenge also is that I hope give a as true as possible representation of the full thing.
Yes.
So we made a lot of decisions, and we were very blessed because we now have an ensemble of actors who do all the education work. Last year, our associate director James and I were able to work with those actors on editing the text, which is just such a gift because these actors had been on the road performing for 8 or 9 months by then. Yeah. So they're completely in tune with what the students were interested in and what particular things were exciting for the students and what things were maybe boring and didn't work. And so when we were working on the play, what happened is that we ended up just kind of trimming. So we haven't removed any whole elements. Like everything is there. We've just trimmed it back to try and get it into a nice 90 minutes. And I have to say, I think the dream does lend itself better than most to that treatment. Okay. You can just take a little bit from here, a little bit from here, but if the students are studying it, they'll be able to go back and they'll be able to see what we've trimmed. But I don't think, as we say, that the cuts aren't bleeding.
Yes. Yeah.
That I think it's that I think that it's a pretty good edit. That we get a pretty true sense, and that's part of what we want to do is we want to show a particular production, get the audience engaged with what these particular choices might be, and be able to write about that or think about that and go back into the text and see what we cut or what we did. I think is might be a point of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. With Midsummer Night's Dream, I often, just in my own head at least, it feels like it's one of the most has so much visual potential in terms of costuming because of those 3 groups we're talking about. Yeah. Has it been an interesting experience sort of working with a designer on a Midsummer to sort of bring out those different voices, those different worlds?
I think it's interesting with this one because I wanted to keep it as kind of contemporary and today as possible. I didn't want to set it necessarily in a particular place. And in fact, we're really looking at the theatre and the stage, really, and we're looking at a kind of rehearsal room in a way that in our particular production, the mechanicals play they're putting on could very easily be us putting on our play. So in a way, we're incorporating quite everyday clothes and everyday props, but then I hope we'll kind of use them in a way where just with adding an element here or taking an element away, then we change character or we change worlds. Yeah. So again, it's about us getting in dialogue with the audience and saying, we're going to do this, you're going to see exactly what we're doing and we're going to do it very, very simply and you're just going to come with us. Yeah, and these actors are just going to take us on a journey. Yeah. So that side of it I find really intriguing. And then we're still quite early in rehearsals, and so we're still trying to work out what that may be. But the brief really is to engage the students in coming on these changes and these transformations with us.
Yes, fantastic. Pete, last question. It's so often seen as, or produced as, just a slapstick, sort of a light-hearted romp.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that there's a lot of other stuff in there as well. What, aside from the fun and the joy, what else do you think can be taken away from A Midsummer Night's Dream? What exists in the text?
Well, I think how foolish we can all be when we're in love is one of Shakespeare's points.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of pain in the play. I think there's a lot of sadness and that kind of love agony that we've all been through. We all know what that's like, and I think he explores that quite deeply. And we're certainly interested in exploring that. That it isn't all just fun and games. That there is a kind of struggle going on for these, particularly for the younger people. But there's also the lightness comes because Shakespeare's so generous about our humanity. And so he allows to see, we can look at ourselves and see how foolish we are or see how arrogant we may be behaving, but he does it in such a way that we can kind of look at it and we can laugh.
Yeah.
And I think that also comes with the mechanicals, is that we see how earnest they are about their endeavour.
Yeah.
And they want to be doing this play, and if they can get the play on before the Duke, they'll be celebrities.
Yeah.
You know, they'll be superstars, and we see their ambition, and they're not very good at it.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Yeah.
And it's just like I just think it's so warm-hearted.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's one of the great plays.
Yeah.
And you know, it's obviously great to perform. I love directing it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the people who come and see it, they'll be able to see our kind of great love in this company for this play.
Absolutely. Just actually, since we brought it up, who is your favourite character? I have mine.
Oh, it's pretty hard to go past Bottom.
Yeah.
It's
Same.
pretty difficult.
Yeah,
it's
I
kind
agree.
of one of the great characters ever written for all those reasons, really, because he's pretty selfish and he's pretty self-important and he thinks he's a better actor than he actually is, which is hilarious. Because we work in this business, and we know people.
We know
like
those
that.
people. Yeah, there's plenty of them.
We may actually be those people.
Absolutely.
But we kind of blindly like Bottom. We don't know.
I think that's why we're laughing, aren't we?
No.
We recognise a bit in us.
It's us. It's us, and we don't care.
Yeah, that's right. And then he's so endearing, isn't he? Because he has a heart of gold, and I love the fact that he can wake up dressed as a donkey or transformed as a donkey and being fed by a fairy queen and take it in his stride.
Isn't that great?
Like, that sounds like the most amazing experience one could have.
I know, isn't that great? He's just like, okay, all right,
Yeah,
sure. This is happening.
We're here now. I'll get back to rehearsals later.
I know, and it is, isn't that when he wakes up and he has that speech about his dream? I have seen the most rare vision.
Yeah.
God, what a great, like it always strikes me, those kind of 10, 12 lines, how beautiful they are.
Absolutely.
And wanting his pal, the writer-director, Peter Quince, to write a play about it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
It's so endearing. You just want that to succeed.
Don't you want to see that?
Yeah.
Bottom's dream? Well, maybe we
Absolutely.
do. Maybe that's what the Midsummer Night's Dream is, Bottom's dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Pete, thank you so much. It's
Thank
been an
you,
absolute
Paul.
joy. Good luck with production.
Thank you. Thank you.